Alright, so it's about time for another update on the cotton gin. So here I have my nice new custom rollers, except not, because they're pretty much useless. The guy who I commissioned to make me some custom rollers for the thing screwed me over, and as you can see here, I am currently driving in, or boring out, and then driving in dowels into the ends of these, because I sent him very specific directions, very specific specifications, and he got all of the external dimensions perfect. They're exactly as I asked. And as you can see here, the bore is not concentric. It's not even close to being concentric. You know, out of the four ends of this was the only one that was within a 1/16 of an inch of the axes. And with the directions I sent him, he should have done this before he turned anything. So he should have centered on this hole and then turned these rollers, and that would have given him a perfectly concentric roller. And if he had a lathe that wasn't broken, he should have had exactly perfectly concentric rollers, and it should have been impossible for him to mess that up. He obviously didn't do that, and he screwed the whole thing over and charged me a boatload of money for this, and I'm really pissed off about that, but I'm over it now. So I'm working to fix his problem. So as you can see here, these are not concentric. Some of these are like 1/8 of an inch off of axis, which is absolutely unusable. When I have a metal axle with gears that are driving these things that have a tooth that is only 1.5 millimeters tall, I cannot have the roller any more than that, the height of that tooth off axis. And if the diameter of these rollers is off by a little bit, the gears won't engage. If these are off axis, then the rollers will do this. They'll do this as they spin, which is totally useless. That'll crush seeds and it won't pull cotton. So anyway, I'm in here fixing this mess. This end is good. I've driven in a dowel in here. I'm just using the piece off of an old chair that broke, and I'm driving that in. That's hardwood, I think. So also, I learned the other day that these rollers traditionally were made of teak, so that's interesting to note. If I ever get another set of these made by someone who is local to me, who I can actually watch do it and won't screw me over, I'm going to have these made of teak. So at the moment, I'm just using a 5/8 brad point bit. Well, not brad point, but you get the drift. And some spade bits to drill these out to 7/8, and then I'm driving in this slightly conical dowel flush, and then cutting it off, or driving it in and then cutting it off flush. And then I'm going to have to center drill these axes out so that I can have a concentric bore, and then I'll finally be able to gin cotton. Also, right now it's currently emergency evacuation for all of coastal South Carolina for Hurricane Dorian, but I ain't going anywhere. So I'm in my garage doing this, and it's currently very, very nice outside and not raining, because everything in South Carolina has been shut down, or everything in Charleston County has been shut down for the next 4 days, even though the hurricane's not going to get here till Thursday. Oh joy. In order to countersink these things, we're going to have to use the big drill bit. Don't ask me why I have a 1 3/16 brad point. It's a long story. Alright. One beer, one dinner, and one pre-hurricane trip to the hardware store later, and I have put in bushings and then re-drilled concentric holes on 3 sides of the rollers. There was that one side that was perfectly concentric that I didn't have to worry about, and then I had to do all 3 of the other ones. I had 2 go in good enough the first go around that I could leave them, and then with the last piece of this curved chair dowel backing bit that I had, I got it off center, so whiff. So I had to go run to the hardware store and buy a 1-inch dowel and then turn it down to just a little over 7/8. I think it's like the hole that I drilled with the 7/8 spade bit doesn't end up 7/8. It ends up like 15/16. So I had to go buy a 1-inch dowel, 1-inch oak dowel, and then turn that down to 15/16 and drive it in. So that's what I did. And when I drilled that drilled perfectly. So that drilling down the grain on oak, the drill bit stayed with the grain the entire time, whereas drilling down the grain with this pine or whatever the heck else this chair was made of, it was a hot mess. It just did not want to stay in the center. So that's all done now. And to prove it, I'm going to put on the caliper. And everything is within a 1/16 of an inch. I don't think anything is perfect, but everything is close enough for cotton work. And what I'm looking to see here is that every one of these measurements is identical, which is not going to happen because that's how woodworking is, especially when you're not turning concentric. I think this was the worst of the three. It was off by a 1/16 of an inch. Yeah, you can see it there. It's exactly 3/4 on that side, and you pop it over onto this side, and it's 1/16 of an inch above. So now the only problem is that these holes that I'm drilled are not quite straight in the dowel rod. So if these holes are not straight, then when I put the dowel in, or when I put the metal axle down the shaft, it's going to pitch to one side, and then I have to bend it to get it to go through the other side, or potentially knock out the bushings, put the bushing on both ends at the same time, and then beat it in with like a socket or something and just get it torqued on the axle, and that's going to be a big nightmare. I'm going to have to redo all the bushings, something like that. It's not going to be fun. This guy's probably fine, and that one down here is probably fine. But I'm a little worried about these over here because they're not all straight with the shaft, which is going to make things funny, and it may just introduce the same issue as having a non-concentric roller. But that's a nice thing about using bushings, is that I can just take this metal rod and then push it up in here, put it on the bottom of this, and beat on it until this bushing comes out, and then I can just drive a new one in and keep doing that until it works. So these are replaceable and expendable. These are not so much. So now we're just going to have to see how these two bears look on the roller cotton gin, and if they actually interface correctly or if they're off axis, and I have to redo this again. Alright, so it's the next day, and as expected, some of these bushings that were pitched to one way or the other in the bore do not want to cooperate. So I'm here with a big washer, a 9/16 half-inch socket, and 5-pound slide hammer, trying to beat it in. I've got it, 75% of the way in, and it's still fairly concentric. This is the end with that oak dowel in it, by the way, which is perfectly straight, and it's coming out perfectly straight on this end, but this is one of those conical ones. And I think that's really messing me up because that pine I was using was cross grain, and I'm trying to drill a perfectly straight hole down a cross drain, so the drill bits naturally start to curve until they come out curved, and since it's conical, you can't really fight it as much, and anyway, it's becoming a nightmare. So I've been beating this one in. It's starting to crack. I don't think it's going to go any farther. It'd be great if I could be able to put some sort of torque like this on there while I beat it to get it to go down a little bit further. But I think we're close enough. So I just came around, I just cut the whole perimeter of this with a saw, and then just took a knife and cut it vertically, and then chipped it off, and then cut around the outside. So now that's nice and flush and won't interfere with the washers. Now on to the next one. Alright, that one actually beat in relatively easy, and it's flush. It's a little bit off of my key marks, but it shouldn't matter. So, I'm surprised that neither of these cracked. I guess that's the upside of having a nice tight hardwood and being on grain. Time to put them on the gin and see if they actually work. I feel they're going to be a little bit sloppy, and I might be able to make up for that by redesigning the tensioning system. We'll see how they do at the moment. I think that just having the extra diameter and being a 1/16 of an inch on center should be enough to get me by, and if not, I'll just have another set made. And then we'll do this whole process over again, probably. Alright, new problem that we gotta work on. For one reason or another, these two are not properly spaced apart. They're only like 1 1/4 inch apart from edge to edge, and they need to be 1 1/2. So when I stick the two rollers in there, they sort of do this on this end, because this one doesn't go up high enough. And I don't know why them kids are out there with air horns. People do crazy things during hurricanes. So I've got to get in here and I've got to Dremel out another 1/4 inch out of this up here so that this bearing can push upward in here and the axles can pass through it. Because this one's perfectly spaced, but this one is just way too low for some reason. I think I screwed up when I was drilling that. So I'm going to have to get in there with the drill bit or something and really open that up. And that's all dependent on if the channel in here actually has enough room. So I'm probably going to need to pull this apart and re-gap everything in there. So I'm going to get to that. Yeah, these pigs aren't even close. So that's all the slop they got. I got to take another 1/4 inch off the top of this channel. And this right here is the channel that the tensioning spring rides up and down in. So, as you can see, this one ended up lopsided, so the tensioning spring is way off to one side. Check out these industrial springs I got. Tough little suckers. And just like that, they've been dremeled out to fit. So now there is very easily a 1.5 inch gap. There's almost a 1 3/4 inch gap now. So there's plenty of slop in here. Plenty of room for that spring to do the work it needs to do. But just like I was saying, plenty of room for that spring to get down there and do its work without binding and still being free in the channel. So, guess I'll slap this bad boy back together and see how it does. Probably need to replace some of these washers in here. These are pretty grimy. That's all I had on hand when I made this. And as you can see, easy 1.5 inch gap. Alright, now I gotta do the same thing for the other side, so let's get to that. Now that this sucker is now done, we can finally put that thing on there and see if we actually get clearance on the rollers. Hi, so it's been a while, but the gin is now functional. So, well, it hasn't been a while since the last series of videos you've been watching, but it's been a month, 2 months since the last time I showed you the entire Treadle gin. And in that time, I have 2 sets of gears, 1 set of steel pulleys, and I have a zinc pulley over here because that's what I originally got just to test out this whole setup, and it ended up being the correct size for the belt, so I'm just leaving that on there as the drive pulley. Got the tensioners installed. I have some really serious industrial flat wire springs inside of here to act as the tensioner on the bearings for the roller axles. I added this bracket down here that you can't see. It's just there in case I want to add an idler pulley in the future. I just did that a couple of minutes ago because I thought I was going to need an idler pulley, but after running the gin for a little bit, all of the sort of tension I was worried about wore out, so I can continue using this zinc pulley, and it's perfectly tensioned, and I don't have to add any other auxiliary pulleys in order to get this belt nice and tight without putting too much tension over here, which pulls this axle out of gear. So just to demonstrate that it does work, running. It's hard to do this without having both feet on the treadle. Let's try that again. Normally you wouldn't be using 2 hands to hold the table down, but I'm just going to do that for the sake of speed. There you go, it works. And as this goes along, I'll be able to let off of these tensioners in order to decrease the load on these axles and get this to spin a lot faster. But at the moment, I'm still breaking these rollers in, so it's a little bit tight, and I want it a little bit tight. So that's why it's so difficult to go, or so difficult rolling at the moment. But as I go, these rollers were sort of smush and mate together, and they'll slack off a little bit. At the moment, we don't have anything larger than about 3/64 of an inch between the rollers at any one point in time, which is perfect. Having 1/32 space the whole way down would be a lot better, but that's what I'm dealing with at the moment. Once again, these are going to wear in together, and then they'll be mated, and then that gap will be non-existent in the future. But as it stands at the moment, there's a few irregularities, and that knocks some of the gears out of place at times, and that might add a little bit of an issue I also do have this lap board installed over here. Probably still need to adjust that, but at the moment it's pretty good. I might be putting a little bit of extra friction on the back of this roller, so I'll look into that when I'm done with this video. But as it stands, this is fully functional. I can do gin cotton and everything, hands-free. So this is probably the setup that I'm going to have to gin the cotton here shortly. It's the first week of September, and if the cotton survives Hurricane Dorian, which is currently circling overhead, then I'll have plenty of cotton to run through this thing and work out all the kinks. And there are plenty of kinks to work out, and there's a lot of improvements I could make, but I think this gin is going to stay in this configuration. If anything, I'll just build a second gin. I may also convert this to electric, because this treadle, although it provides a great weighted table for this, it's really inefficient, and you can't really focus on what you're doing up here with your hands when you're having to work the treadle the whole time. Although this is wearing in really nicely now that I'm doing it. And all of this still needs to be greased as well. I just have it raw at the moment. I didn't want to accidentally ruin any of the wood by introducing too much grease into the system, but I think just a little bit of lithium grease should do a world of good on these gears and washers. So yeah, that's it. Cotton gin is here. It's complete. It's finished. This will be gin and cotton for me here shortly, unless I accidentally knock it over and break the whole thing apart, because that would suck really hard. But it's working despite difficulties. Tom Allen. I'm not going to break it.